Hi and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Mohammed Kubaib. In this video, we are going to discuss about business continuity and disaster recovery for Azure Virtual Desktop. If you like this video, please hit the bell icon and subscribe to my channel. If you want to learn more about Azure, Citrix or Netscaler or AWS Cloud, you can check out my bestseller Udemy course, which is also available in Udemy for Business. So before we jumping into the topic, first we need to understand what is BCDR and why we need business continuity and disaster recovery. So as per the statement, a BCDR a strategy that keeps your critical applications and workload up and running during the planned and unplanned service or Azure outages. So in order to understand this, consider a data center. For example, this is the data center. So let's say this is in UAE, and here you have your racks in your data center, and inside this rack you have your servers. So inside this servers you have your virtual machines, storage, or any other services which is required for your business. So consider a disaster scenario such as maybe power outage or flood or earthquake, etc. So in this scenario, your data center may have issues. For example, let's say if there is an earthquake, then your entire data center may go down. So the users which is accessing your applications may be not only from UAE, from other locations such as US or India or some other locations, they won't be able to access your services. So you'll have a total outage which is resulting in financial impact or business impact. So a proper BCDR, which is a business continuity and disaster recovery strategy, which can help you to overcome from these challenges. So basically what we are going to do is, instead of keeping a dependency on one data center, we are going to build a multiple data center. So this is maybe your primary data center, though this is maybe your secondary data center. So for example, let's say this is in UAE. So this may be in some other region. For example, nearest is Qatar or some other region which is preferable for your company. Or you can place within a UAE, you can keep in Dubai, or another one you can keep it in Abu Dhabi. So which is approximately around 200 kilometer apart. So by keeping in different city or different country, so even though there is an earthquake or natural calamity happening in one region, so it won't impact the other one, so that your user will have access to your applications or your business systems without any issue. Why? Because there is no impact on the other region where you have your servers or storage or any other web applications, etc. So user can work irrespective of your primary data center having any issue. So this is how BCDR will come into rescue when there is a calamity or natural disaster on your data center or on your region. Before we deep dive into BCDR, we need to understand what is Azure regions and what is availability zones, because this is very important and this is the vital part of BCDR. So Azure regions are geographic locations where Microsoft Azure hosts its data center. So the meaning of this is wherever you can see Azure data center in the world, so which is referred as Azure regions. For example, I'm located in UAE. So here in UAE, we have two regions. One is UAE North and another one is UAE Central. So which is located in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Similarly, if you take India, we have three Azure regions, which is West India, Central India, and South India, which is in Chennai. So similarly, across the world, we'll have a different geographical locations, or you can say country. So in each country, we have either one or two or multiple regions as per the requirements. So if you see the world map, here you can see multiple regions across the world. So this is, we often refer it as regions. So regions are basically nothing but Microsoft Azure data centers in specific geographical location. So let's talk about availability zones. So availability zones are physically and logically separated data center within their own independent power source, network, and cooling. The meaning of this is, earlier we discussed about region. So region, for example, I consider UAE North. This is a region, or I can consider Central India or South India. So within the region, Microsoft will have multiple data center. So for example, let's say in UAE North, we have three data centers. So each data center is separated by some physical distance, maybe 100 or 200 kilometer. So each data center will have its own independent power, network, and cooling features. So there is no dependency between the data centers. For example, let's say if some disaster strikes on this data center, still there is no issue for the other two data centers because it is physically separated by some distance and it has got its own power, cooling, and network. So there is no impact if one data center goes down. Still Microsoft will have another two data center. So these data centers we call it as availability zone. So let's say this is availability zone 1, and this is availability zone 2, and this is availability zone 3. So by default Microsoft will have three availability zones within the region. So if you see this diagram, so as you can see here, we have a Azure region. For example, consider this as a Central India or South India or any other region. So within the region, we'll have three data centers. So this is very important to understand what is availability zones within the region. So in a nutshell, availability zones are a independent data center within Azure region. So let's talk about Azure Virtual Desktop BCDR. So when we talk about Azure Virtual Desktop, the architecture will have two very important components. One is Azure Virtual Desktop control plane, as you can see, which is completely managed by Microsoft. Another one is workload layer. So here we will have our VMs or VDI or session host, and we'll have our storage, which will contain our profile data, etc., etc. So by default, the Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop control plane, this is completely managed by Microsoft. So customer does not have any visibility to this layer. So even though there is an outage on the Microsoft control plane, Microsoft will take care about the BCDR. So customer no need to worry anything about it. So Microsoft will fail over to some other region or some other availability zone, so which is not our business. So it is Microsoft responsibility to take care of the control plane and provide SLA of 99.99%, whatever which is defined. So as a customer, you have to take care about the workload layer, which I just explained, where we have our VMs and we have our storage. So basically, this is our subscription, so on which we deploy our session host. So let's deep dive into this particular portion and we will see what are the available options. Let's see what are the components required for BCDR with respect to Azure Virtual Desktop. So as I told you, the control plane, which is completely taking, as I told you, the control plane which will be completely taken care by Microsoft, so which is not required to include in the BCDR component from the customer perspective. So the remaining components are virtual machines. So this is very important because this is where you will have all your applications users will access. And then we have storage. So this is nothing but FSlogix share, where we'll keep our user data, etc., on the profile share. And then we have golden images. So whenever we need any VMs to be added to the pool or session host, or if you wanted to create a new host pool, then we need these golden images because golden images will contain all the configurations, applications, etc. So basically we need to take care of these three components and make sure that these three components are highly available even though there is a disaster in any region or any availability zone or any data center. So when it comes to Azure, we have two types of BCDR design. So first one is we can deploy our Azure Virtual Desktop across the region. So the meaning of this is, for example, consider UAE. So this is the geographical location. So here in UAE, Microsoft is having two regions. So region 1 is UAE North and region 2 is UAE Central. So when you deploy your Azure Virtual Desktop or Azure Virtual Desktop session or storage, etc., etc., one option, you can keep one set of components in one region and another set of component in another region. The meaning of this is, for example, let's say you are deploying 100 VDIs or 100 VMs to support your user load. So what you can do, you can keep 100 virtual machines in the UAE North region, and similarly you have to create another 100 in the UAE Central. So similarly it goes with storage as well. So you have to create a storage account here, as well as you have to create a storage account here. So then using a concept called cloud cache, you can configure the replication, so that you'll have all the data available across the region. So even though there is a disaster strikes to your primary region, which is UAE North, still you'll have your virtual machines available in UAE Central, and you'll have your data available on your storage account because of the cloud cache. So let's say if this is the user, so if this site is down, then you can ask the user to go to your another region, and he can access his VDI and he can access all his data, because all the data, everything will be get synchronized using the cloud cache, which is a concept of FSlogix, which I covered in my earlier videos. So this is how you can tolerate the disaster. On top of it, we'll have images, as I told you, golden images. So golden image, you can use Azure shared image gallery or compute gallery. So what it will do, the compute gallery, it will automatically replicate your golden image or your master image to the another region. So it will create one copy of your golden image here as well. So in a nutshell, you will have your virtual machines, you will have your storage account, and you will have your golden images across the regions. So even there is a disaster in one specific region, you no need to worry, you will have everything in another region, so that you won't have any much downtime, and your users can contact the another region and they can access their applications or VDIs. So there should not be any big business or financial impact if you have such model. So the drawback of this is, for example, let's say this is a active passive solution. For example, always you use UAE North as a primary and UAE Central as a secondary. So here in this cases, you have to create and maintain or manage all your virtual machines separately in the UAE Central. So this is one of the biggest management overhead, because regularly you have to patch your virtual machines, regularly you have to check your storage accounts, and also check your golden images. So on top of it, it comes with extra cost. First one is management overhead, second one is cost. So even though you don't use your UAE Central or your passive data center or passive region resources, still you have to pay for the storage or virtual machines or whatever the other services you use. Although you can turn off the VMs, but again you are going to pay for the disk. So if you turn off the VM, you're just saving the compute cost, but you will pay for the disk and bandwidth or any other services which is associated with this particular region. And also for the storage you are going to pay. So it is, in a nutshell, you have to pay for your disaster site or your passive site, even though if you are not actively use this particular region. So this is the disadvantage of this particular model, where you will have two regions and you'll deploy your VM storage across two separate regions. So in order to overcome from this particular challenges, we have one more option, which is deploy your Azure Virtual Desktop using availability zones. So the meaning of this is, earlier we used to consider two regions, but now we are considering only one region. So for example, this is UAE North, so single region. So as I told you, in a single region, Microsoft will have three data center, so which is called as availability zones: availability zone 1, availability zone 2, and availability zone 3. So now with the help of availability zone, we are going to define the BCDR, which is business continuity and disaster recovery. So in order to have a BCDR for Azure Virtual Desktop, so what we have to do is we need to deploy our VMs and storage across the availability zones. So earlier we used to deploy across the regions. Now we will deploy across the availability zones. For example, let's imagine I have a requirement to deploy 100 VMs or 100 session host, I'll deploy 30 here, 30 here, and 40 VMs here. So even though there is a downtime or there is an issue on the first data center availability zones, I will have two other data centers available. So user does not face any issue because they can connect to another data center and they can work without any issue. So we need to make sure that if there is an outage on this particular data center, so we should have some spare VMs available over here in order to take the load. For example, let's say 15 as well as 15, if you keep it as a spare, and you can turn it on only when there is an outage in one of the data center, so that you will manage all these VMs within your availability zone. So you no need to depend on some other regions and you have to pay extra. So nothing is required. It is an highly available solution. So you can use it as an active. So this is with respect to virtual machines. So what about for storage? So earlier we used to deploy storage in each region and then we used to use cloud cache for the replication. However, in however here in availability zone we need to go with storage which supports ZRS. So ZRS is nothing but zone redundant storage. What it will do, it will keep a copy of your profile share across the availability zones. For example, let's say if we have a FSlogix share which is created in an Azure file using ZRS, then it will keep three copies in each availability zone. So in AZ1 we'll have one availability, we'll have one copy. In AZ2 we'll have another copy, and in AZ3 we'll have another copy. So even though if there is an issue or if there is an outage in one of the data center, you no need to worry because your profile share is available on remaining two data center or availability zones. So this is the beauty of deploying Azure Virtual Desktop for a active solution using availability zones. So in a nutshell, what you're going to do is you are going to deploy your VMs in three availability zones: AZ1, AZ2, and AZ3. Similarly, your storage or your FSlogix profile share, you're going to deploy across the availability zone, which is we call it as ZRS. So it will keep a copy in one zone and another copy in another zone and the third copy in the third zone. The biggest advantage of this is the cost saving. So you no need to maintain a separate region where you have to keep some resources and you have to pay even though you're not using it actively. So here it is an active solution. So you're always using all your resources irrespective of it is deployed in any of the availability zones. So this is in nutshell how you can deploy your AVD solution using availability zones. So if you go to the diagram, so here in this diagram you can see I have my virtual machines deployed across three zones, which is zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. Then I have my FSlogix profile share which is deployed in a Azure premium file ZRS, which is zone redundant storage. So now you'll have a question related to golden images. How we'll take care about the golden images when we deploy availability zones? As I told you, there is no dependency of golden images with respect to availability zones. So golden images always it will be on the region level. So even let's say if you create a golden image in UAE North, so by default this golden image available across all availability zones. AZ2 and AZ3. For example, let's imagine if one availability zone goes down, then you no need to worry about your images because other availability zones still have access to your golden images because golden images comes at the regional level, not at the availability zone level. So let's quickly see how we can deploy Azure Virtual Desktop session host across availability zones and also the storage account. So we need to go to the Azure Virtual Desktop blade. So here we can click on create new host pool if you wanted to create a new. So otherwise, if you have an existing host pool, you can select your existing host pool and you can add the VMs across availability zones. So for simplicity, I'll just go to the overview and I'll click on create host pool. So here we need to fill some details related to the resource group, etc. So I'm going to create a host pool with the name test-hp-az. So I will keep the location east us. This is for the metadata. So this is not exactly the VM location. So metadata will contain all the username and application details, video details, etc, etc. So validation environment, I'll keep it no, and preferred group I'll keep as it is desktop, and host pool I'll keep it as pooled, because this particular concept is only applicable for the pooled VDI. So I'll keep everything as it is. I'll go to next. So here we need to select add Azure Virtual Desktop machines. Click on yes. So here give the name for the VDI. So I'm going to give a name AVD AZ test. So this is the location, or this is the region you need to select on which you wanted to deploy your VMs. So here I'm going to select UAE North, and then under availability option, this is very important. This is where we have to select the availability zones. So it will ask on which availability zone you wanted to deploy your VMs. So I'll select all the three because I want to spread my virtual machines across three data centers. So I'll select all the three, and then you need to select the image. So you can select from the marketplace, or if you have anything on the shared image gallery, you can select. So for simplicity, I'll select the marketplace image, and here number of VMs you can select any number as per your requirement. For example, here if I click 3, so if I select 3, then all the 3 VMs will be deployed across multiple availability zones. So if I select a 9, then 3 VMs will be deployed on first availability zone, and the remaining 3 will be scattered across two different availability zones. For it means on the first we will have 3, and the second we will have another 3 VMs, and on the last availability zone we will have another 3. So this is how it will spread my 9 virtual machines across 3 availability zones. So rest everything is as it is. You need to select your virtual machines, network group, etc, etc, and then you can click on review and create. So I'm not going to cover everything here. You can check out my older videos, so which is available in YouTube. So also you can check out my Udemy course where I have covered step by step process to create the host pool. So for this demo, you just make sure that you select availability zones, and then you select all the availability zones as per your requirement. So some companies they wanted to choose only 2 zones, so some companies they wanted to choose 3 zones. So it depends on your requirement. However, don't select only one, because that does not make any sense when you're going with availability zones. At least you should use 2 or 3. So this is how you create your Azure Virtual Desktop session host and spread it across availability zones. So now let's go to the storage account. So we need to click on storage account. So once we are in the storage account blade, so let's click on create new storage account. So here subscription by default it will get selected. So if you wanted to deploy in any other subscription, you can choose as per your requirement. Resource group, you can select the resource group and then give a name. So I'm going to give a name test az FSlogix. And region, this is very important. This is the region you wanted to select on which you are going to deploy your storage account. So in this example I'm going to use UAE North. So here under performance we'll have two options, either standard or premium. For VDA workload, always use premium storage account because of high IOPS requirements. So select file share. So this is the important part. So here we'll have locally redundant and zone redundant. So locally redundant means it will keep your data in only one availability zones. So however, if you wanted to use multiple availability zones to keep your data, then you should use ZRS. So this is the concept of this particular video. We have to use zone redundant storage so that your data or FSLogix share data will be available across all three availability zones. So that's it. You can just go to review and create your storage accounts. So if you wanted to learn more about storage account, I have covered it in my Udemy and as well as YouTube. You can check out. how to create storage account and how to join to the domain, etc., etc. But on a nutshell, this is how you deploy your storage using zone redundant storage. So we have covered how to deploy AVD across availability zone with respect to virtual machines as well as for the storage.